One winter night in 1884, 14 nations sat around a table in Germany. No African was in the room. Not one. And by the time those men stood up and went home, the entire continent of Africa had been divided, carved up, and handed out like slices of bread at a dinner table. This is not ancient history. This happened 140 years ago. And the borders they drew that night, with rulers, ink, and zero regard for the people living there, those same borders still exist today, still causing wars, still splitting families, still keeping nations poor. What happened inside that building in Berlin is one of the greatest acts of theft in human history, and most schools will never teach you the full story. Stay with me, because this goes deeper than you think. Africa in 1880 was not an empty land waiting to be discovered. It was a continent of kingdoms. The Zulu Empire controlled vast stretches of southern Africa with military precision that stunned European generals. The Ashanti Kingdom in present-day Ghana had gold, trade networks, and a court system more structured than many European cities of the same era. Ethiopia had emperors who traced their lineage back 1,000 years. The Swahili coast was a thriving international trade hub, connecting Africa to Arabia, India, and China, centuries before any European explorer arrived. The Congo Basin held millions of people, complex societies, and oral traditions older than most European nations. North Africa had universities. West Africa had trans-Saharan trade routes carrying salt, gold, and knowledge across the desert for generations. This was not a primitive land. This was a living, breathing, thriving world. And 14 nations looked at it and said, "We want it." The man who called the meeting was Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Germany. He sent invitations to 13 other powers. Britain came, France came, Portugal came, the oldest colonial presence in Africa, already holding Angola and Mozambique. Belgium came, represented not by a humble diplomat, but by the shadow of one man, King Leopold II, a king who wanted the Congo for himself. Spain came, Italy came, the Netherlands came, Austria-Hungary came, Denmark came, Sweden came, the Ottoman Empire came, the United States came as an observer, watching, learning, taking notes. Russia came, and Germany herself hosted. 14 nations, one agenda, 0 Africans. They called it the Congo Conference. They said it was about free trade, about ending the slave trade, about bringing civilization to a dark continent. That was the cover story. The real agenda was land. The conference opened on November 15, 1884. They worked for 3 months. 3 months of private dinners, closed-door negotiations, and map drawing behind sealed walls. They spread a massive map of Africa across the table and drew lines. Straight lines. Perfectly geometric lines that cut through mountains, rivers, forests, and villages, through ethnic groups that had lived together for centuries, through kingdoms that had stood for 1,000 years. They gave the Congo Free State, a territory 76 times the size of Belgium, to one man, King Leopold II. Not to Belgium, to the king personally. Britain took the east and south, from Egypt all the way down to Cape Colony. France took the west and north, Senegal, Mali, Algeria, Morocco, Ivory Coast, Niger, and more. Portugal kept Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau. Germany took Namibia, Tanzania, Cameroon, and Togo. Italy was handed Libya, Eritrea, and Somalia. Spain received Spanish Morocco and Equatorial Guinea. The Ottoman Empire held Egypt and parts of Sudan, for now. The boundaries they created split over 150 ethnic groups across different colonial territories overnight. The Maasai people split between British East Africa and German East Africa. The Yu people split between British Gold Coast and German Togoland. The Somali people divided between British, Italian, French, and Ethiopian control. One people, for different colonial masters. Not because of war, because of a line drawn by a cartographer who had never once set foot on African soil. And when Africans resisted, because they did resist, the colonial powers came back with rifles, cannons, and laws designed to crush them permanently. The Herero people of Namibia rose up against German colonizers in 1904. Germany's answer became the first genocide of the 20th century. The Ashanti resisted the British for separate times. Ethiopia faced down Italy at the Battle of Adwa in 1896 and won. one of the only African nations to repel a European colonial army on home soil. But everywhere else, the lines held. Forced labor, rubber quotas enforced at gunpoint in the Congo, language suppression, cultural erasure, the deliberate destruction of everything that existed before that night in Berlin. And here is the part they left out of the textbooks. When African nations gained independence in the 1950s and 1960s, they inherited those same borders. The exact borders drawn in Berlin. The international community said, do not change them. Stability requires keeping the map as it is. So the fault lines that Europe carved in 1884 became the exact fault lines that fueled civil wars in Nigeria, Sudan, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, and Somalia. The poverty that colonial extraction built into the foundations of these nations did not disappear when the flags changed. It stayed, because the systems were renegotiated, not removed. The meeting in Berlin lasted 3 months. Its consequences are still being lived every single day. Now let me tell you what they never put in those history books. The Democratic Republic of Congo alone holds an estimated $24 trillion in untapped mineral wealth. Nigeria sits on one of the world's largest oil reserves. Ghana has gold. South Africa has diamonds and platinum. Tanzania has tanzanite, a gemstone found nowhere else on Earth. The sunlight falling on the Sahara every day carries enough solar energy to power all of Europe 4 times over. Africa is not poor in resources. Africa was deliberately made poor in institutions by the same nations who sat in that room in Berlin. And the people of Africa? They are among the most resilient, gifted, and brilliant human beings on this planet. The entrepreneurs of Lagos building from nothing. The engineers of Nairobi leading the world in mobile payment technology. The artists of Accra reshaping global fashion, music, and film. Nigeria has been failed by many of its own leaders, deeply and painfully failed. But the people, the writers, musicians, athletes, scientists, and storytellers, they rise out of broken systems and stand on global stages anyway. That is not despite the people of Africa. That is because of them. 14 nations gathered in Berlin in 1884. Not one African was invited. They drew the lines. They took the land. They wrote the rules. The world is still living with those consequences right now. And now you know. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story has traveled. And here's my real question. Would you visit Africa? Because beyond the corruption, beyond the leaders who have failed their own people, Africa is one of the most breathtaking, spiritually alive, culturally rich places on this earth. The food, the music, the landscapes, the people who will welcome you like family. Africa is a blessed continent. It always has been. If you could visit any African country, just one, drop the name in the comments below. Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Egypt, Morocco, South Africa, Senegal, Rwanda. Which one is calling your name? The people of Africa deserve to know the world still sees them. This continent was robbed in a room in Berlin in 1884. But what was taken cannot stay taken forever. Share this video, because this story should not stay hidden for another 140 years.